Let's get going. So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, figure out what the future is for smart buildings. Our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org, just in case you wonder who we are. Just to point out, the views expressed are personal, not of any company or organization. And please do post any questions and comments on the Zoom chat. We want to make this as interactive as possible. It's always much better if we get a lot of interaction. So looking forward to that. This deck is on mondaylive.org in case you want any of the links on it. Head over there. So this is the second week of October when we are talking about industry metamorphosis. How the industry is changing, especially in light of all of the issues we discussed last month in September. So that's our focus this month. Our agenda is normal, chit chat, and then we want to talk about metamorphosis, and specifically we want to focus on the edge. Sort of where is the edge is kind of the way we want to sort of frame the conversation. And then some discussions. Before we get going, I'm going to put up a poll. I'm going to launch here that you should all see, and we'll just keep it up for a bit while we're having a chit chat, and then we'll look at the result at the end. But basically, trying to get your thoughts about where the edge is, because people talk about the edge all the time. So please respond to the poll. And in the meantime, hand it over to Ken. What's going on, Ken?
Well, it's busy times. It's Thanksgiving here in Canada. We always do everything first in Canada. So here's just another event for us. Basically, I don't know if you've noticed, the industry is busy, crazy busy. I'm not sure if it's the metamorphosis or trying to find the edge or what's driving us, but everyone I touch is just extremely busy. They want to engage, but they've got so many other things they need to engage with, and it does seem to be a pattern, a trending that is going on. We, in the midst of that, are trying to put together our AHR education sessions, and of course that always involves a lot of speakers and a lot of sponsors, and yeah, trying to get everybody herding the chickens is difficult. So we're getting there. We're making great success, and every time we touch it, it keeps getting a little wider and picks up some new subjects and some new people. So that isn't helping. It isn't like a finite thing. It's a metamorphosis. The other thing I wanted to chat about was the article or the post that Brian Collins and Anto did on the IBB that spawned from Monday Live and C4SB's work, and I think they did a great job of summarizing it. And embodied inside of that is sort of the spirit of what we hope the new automated buildings will evolve to, is a place where we all kind of get together and can collaborate and come up with messages to share with the folks in our industry. So yeah, so that's been a really good, and it's also been supported by Ops System Solution. So they've been basically supporting Brian's time on this project, and that's another thing that we're looking for is, in addition to the financial drive to try and keep this your publication online, we need the brain power and the little pieces of everybody's time to try and drive this along. And I think everybody has issues, not issues isn't the right word, things they want to bring to the industry, and if we can work as teams to do that and basically publish our results on automated buildings, I think it's it's good for us all. That being said, then the last one here is where Project Haystack is one of our sponsors. There was a post with a talk here to discover the cutting edge developments at Haystack Technology. It's some of the better stuff I've heard about Haystack in the last little while, so take a look at that. Other than that, back to you, Anto.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken. I had a couple of things. One is a little bit frivolous, but anyway, on the left, we've been talking about downtowns and cities, and I came across this piece in Fortune saying downtowns are dead. I'm not sure that's right. I'm actually, I know this is in conflict with what Jim has been saying, that ultimately cities are where we want to live because of the interaction. But these guys are looking at, these are sort of urban policy guys looking at what's happening to downtowns. And maybe there's actually a difference between downtown and cities. Because I remember when I lived in Dallas, I never went to Dallas downtown. And whenever I went there, it was always dead anyway. So why would you go there, kind of a thing. So anyway, so I thought that was interesting. And the other thing is that talking about metamorphosis is that there's a lot of metamorphosis going on in New York and in the East Coast generally with these lanternflies. And I just thought that's interesting. It's kind of, there's a whole sort of campaign in New York to basically ask everybody to kill as many lanternflies as possible. It's kind of, I find that weird. It started last year. I was there and I was being encouraged to kill lanternflies. So anyway, it's kind of the two. But the sort of the future of downtown clearly is going to evolve over the next few years. We don't know exactly how, but it'll be interesting to watch. Any thoughts on that, Jim? On the
No, my point stands that there are parts of urban communities that are thriving now, but certainly downtown office business districts are in a lot of trouble. I'll
right.
certainly agree to that.
Okay, cool. And Rick.
Yeah, so for the C4SB update, we're really starting to focus on the Smarter Summit. It's at AHR. Got the date wrong, probably. Maybe somebody fixed it.
I fixed it for you.
Thank you. But we're really starting to look at that because it's only a few months away, and we've got some great traction with what we're doing with the IBB and 2525, and that kind of flows into what we just had with a pretty successful office hour just last week. But we're having quite a bit of success in getting these committees to come together around the IBB and 2525. And for those that want to participate and see what progress has been made, it's pretty substantial in just the last few weeks, with getting sort of targeted at what will be a reveal and a announcement, I guess, maybe at the Smarter Summit in January. But it has been impressive to see what these volunteers have done in terms of coming together to put together a really good plan for the IBB, and then how to use 2525 to both solve the supply side and the demand side of how to get what you want for your smarter building. So sign up for next month's office hours, join us on our IBB calls, and you'll see some pretty interesting progress that's been made. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the IBB later on this morning, or afternoon, where we are.
I'm sure we'll get there. Thank you. Thanks, Rick. The link slide, nothing's changed on there. Just provided for you to use. Any other thoughts or interesting things going on in the world from the group? No? Okay. So let's move on to industry metamorphosis. And before we get there, let me end the poll and see what it is that we have. I think you should all be seeing the poll now. the results of the poll. And it
Nope,
looks
don't
like
see anything.
We're not seeing it.
share result. Okay. Helps if I press the button. You should. So the boundary between the internet and the building is getting tied top votes with somewhere else. And saw Nick saying the distribution layer of the grid. Not quite sure which grid you're talking about, assuming the electric grid, then okay. All right, so not really that surprising. I think that makes sense. Any thoughts from the panel?
Well, sounds a lot like our Wednesday call, where we were, caught between, is the edge an end device like a VAV box, right, or VAV controller, versus that boundary with the internet. So it's because we had the same discussion prior to launching this poll, so not surprising.
Yeah, the tie is actually between the boundary and the end devices. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Not too much to learn there, but interesting. So getting back to the slides. So getting back to industry metamorphosis. So that's kind of the edge. We've been talking about cloud native because we have this sort of vision that by 2030 or thereabouts, all buildings will be cloud native buildings. And so I've got a couple of slides just sort of to present some thoughts about how we can think about the edge in a cloud native manner. And so let me just go through them. First, as a sort of to set the scene, we've all seen diagrams like this. I'm sure we've all created a whole bunch of them, and they're not always exactly the same. They may have different layers, different number of layers, et cetera, different products. But this is basically the traditional BAS architecture, right? With sort of management at top there, and sort of the main bus and the sort of the field bus. And really the question about where the edge is kind of is typically sort of thought about in this context, right? In which case the sort of the answers are either at the top here or somewhere at the bottom or somewhere on the lower layers. But the thing about this architecture that's really sort of interesting before we get to a cloud native is that the functionality of a particular device is tied to its location in this hierarchy. And it's tied there for a real good reason, because that's the structure of the building, that's the structure of the all of the equipment systems, and therefore that's also the structure of the devices and all of the digital controls, right? And you can't move them around, right? In the same way, you can't just take one VAV box or one lighting controller and move it to another part of the building. It doesn't work, right? It doesn't work like that. So everything is static and everything's fixed, right? The architecture is rigid and it's not designed for flexibility, right? And that's for good reason, because typically these get put into a building and it's left for 20 years, right? So we actually don't want it to change, right? So it's actually by design, it's not a bug. And this is one of the reasons why it's really hard to integrate BAS with non-BAS systems, because you really have two options. You either go inside the BAS system and try and do some integration there, or you go totally around it, as in the sort of the IoT kind of approach. Integrating it into the BAS system is hard, because you've got to sort of morph into or meld into the structure, this sort of rigid structure that exists there, right? So this is why it's sort of hard to think about where the edge is here. So let's think about this from a cloud native edge. And the cloud native edge in our sort of conversation is really about the internet connecting through the IBB to the building itself, to the building network in the building itself with a whole bunch of devices, This fictitious building is Acme headquarters in Austin. And let's see how this works. Let's see what actually happens here on this cloud native edge. So the IBB can contain containerized applications, right? So a good possible containerized application could be the actual BAS system. Maybe it's the BAS system on my previous slide or some variant of it, right? And it will be connected to the BACnet MSTP or IP devices or LON or KNX or whatever. It doesn't, you know, as per whatever the specs of the BAS system is. Right, so that could work. That works quite nicely. We're also starting to get a lot of IP controllers, IP devices that really are a whole system in their own right. Right, and these are typically found either doing something in their own right in part of a building, or as packaged as part of a packaged piece of equipment, like a handling unit or a something else, right? So this can happen, and these devices get basically connected to the south side of the IBB, which is really the building network, right? So this makes sense. And then we also have IoTs. Anno's not here, but he's the one that always talks about IoT being there. And IoT typically is installed in this way, right? You have the devices that go directly to the cloud using 5G, 4G, LoRaWAN, or whatever. So this is kind of a sort of a decent starting point. So how does the IBB work to make this sort of be flexible? Let's think about an application. Let's say I want to install an analytics application. So I install the analytics application. Analytics applications, obviously doing analytics, probably taking in Haystack data and creating some actions for users to do something about the event or the issue. Right? That's what it does. So how does the analytics system application work in the IBB? So the way it works and the mechanism of the IBB is that the analytics app, or whatever the app is, when it is installed in the IBB as part of the installation process, the Jake installation process that we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, it makes a declaration. And the declaration goes something like this. In this particular example, I can consume Haystack data about Acme HQ. That's what basically this analytics system would be doing, which is basically saying, give me some Haystack stuff and I can do my job. That's basically it, right? And it says that to the IBB as part of the process of the IBB. It makes a declaration as part of the installation to the IBB. There's a broker functionality in the IBB to do that. And what the IBB does when it sees that is it says, okay, I've got this app that can consume Haystack data about Acme, which is where I am. Let's go and see if there is anything to feed him. And it looks around and it finds, let's say, one of these IP devices having made a declaration when it was installed that it can provide Haystack data about Acme. So IBB basically says, you can consume that and you can provide that. They get connected and data flows between them, just like that. The BAS may also be able to provide Haystack data. It may have some code in there to actually extract all the data or extract all the information and provide it as Haystack. So it will make the same declaration. I can provide Haystack data about Acme, and that gets connected. And the IoT could also do the same thing. It can provide Haystack data, right? So it all gets connected, right? And all that happens automatically in a plug-and-play manner as you install the analytics app the way I've got it configured here. So let's just think about what's going on here. From the analytics applications perspective, it gets what it needs. It gets the feeds that it needs, Haystack in this case. Obviously, it could be anything else. There's nothing special about Haystack. It's just an example. It doesn't know necessarily where it came from. It's not concerned about the fact that the one that came from over here on the BAS actually was a BACnet device, and the one here was actually not a BACnet device. And this the one that came from the IoT, who actually went across 5G. It doesn't care about any of that. It just gets the data from the places that can provide the data within the IBB, or in the case of the IoT, obviously it's in the cloud. So it just gets it and it does its job, right? And that's it. So it doesn't care also if any of this changes. If this gets upgraded to MST, sort of BACnet SC, for example, assuming the BAS still works, then all of that will still work. It really doesn't care. And it also doesn't care if this is 4G or 5G or LoRaWAN. Maybe it gets changed from one to the other. It doesn't care. It doesn't even know. Right? Because they're connected at the system level through the blue lines that's shown there. Right? And the other thing is that things can move around. So Anno was actually saying last week that he's come across sort of situations where the IoT, an IoT vendor's specific, let's say, a security profile is incompatible with the client Acme, right? So this can't work in that particular case. Then what you can do is actually you can, if the IoT vendor is okay with it, you can actually move this into the IBB. Analytics doesn't change, and nothing changes other than the location of the IoT, and it will still work because the analytics doesn't care if it's in the cloud or in the IBB. Right? So the whole thing becomes really flexible. Sort of compare that what I was saying earlier with a traditional structure. You can't move things around. Everything's static. So this is kind of the basics of how the IBB works. And I've got another sort of scenario here that goes into a very specific application. And that is OpenADR. So ADR is automated demand response, right? So this is tackling the OpenADR kind of use case. And here, everything is the same as the previous diagram, same kind of layout, except that we have an OpenADR app instead of an analytics app. And what this OpenADR app does when it's installed, it makes a declaration, because that always happens when you install something in the IBB. And it basically makes a general declaration: I can control energy loads in Acme. Right? That's my job. That's what it's designed to do. Right? This sounds a little bit vague because in this case, it's probably made up of multiple capabilities. Right? In other words, what this really means is that I need to be able to shed loads. I need to get MMV data, and if there are any batteries out there, I can control. I would like to control it. Right? So that's basically what this is saying. So the IBB takes that and it says, okay, thanks for that. Let me see what exists in the IBB, and it sees that the BAS and this IP device can shed BAS energy from Acme HQ, right? So they get connected instantly, and data starts to flow. Maybe negotiating data, asking the BAS, potentially how much energy you can shed, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so that gets connected. IoT is not connected because it can't shed any loads. But guess what? It can provide MMV, right? So it would have had made that declaration to the IBB, and the IBB connects it. And just to make things a little bit more fun, I added EV chargers. And so the idea there is EV chargers either have batteries in the charging sort of infrastructure, or the actual vehicles could actually be used as batteries in what they call V2L, vehicle to load. Right. So we now have a DR energy management system in the IBB that have loads they can shed, that can have access to MMV, and can switch on batteries. There's one thing missing here. OpenADR is all about grid connectivity, and there's no grid here. Right. So the way that would work is that there could be a cloud orchestrator that functionally is exactly the same as the IBB. Right? So think about it as IBB in the cloud, although it's not really necessarily an exact IBB. And what the OpenADR app does is it makes a declaration into that orchestrator. It basically says, hey, I can control Acme HQ energy, and I can shed loads for Austin because that's where I am at. And the cloud orchestrator would then look around and see a whole bunch of other things, and will find that in the case of us, in this case, I just picked ERCOT, which is the organization that controls energy in Texas. It has the responsibility. It has the declaration of controlling energy grid in Austin, right? So a connection is made there, right? So now we have a complete OpenADR system. So what happens is when ERCOT decides one summer morning that they're going to need some help in that afternoon, it will send a signal to this OpenADR app as well as all of the other OpenADR apps in Austin, right? Assuming there are other buildings having this similar architecture. So ERCOT says, yeah, I need from 3 o'clock this afternoon, I need 1 megawatt, and if you can drop 1 megawatt, I can give you $1,000, right? So this will then, in turn, do its thing. It will go to the BAS and say, "Hey, can you drop some load 3 o'clock in the afternoon?" And the BAS can do whatever it needs to within sort of the automate the control architecture that it is, to decide, yeah, okay, I can do that. I can drop, let's say, 400 K. But I need to pre-cool, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. The BAS could do that. So the OpenADR says, thank you. It does the same thing with the other loads to drop additional whatever amount that they can. And it can also get some power from the batteries, right? So it packages all that up and it sends it back to ERCOT and says, yeah, I can do a meg and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to, not only that, I'm going to provide you with MMV because I do that, right? I have that capability. So 3 o'clock comes and obviously all of this happens, and after it all gets settled, and Acme Corp or Acme HQ gets a check for $1,000. Right? So that's kind of how that works. Right? And again, none of this cares about what the media of any of the connected devices are. It doesn't matter. The EV charger could be, as I've drawn it here, outside of the IBB, but it could be inside of the IBB, or it can be in the cloud. It doesn't matter. The IoT could be anywhere, right? So the flexibility of all of this is really in how the blue lines, how the connections are established. One more use case, really sort of from last week's conversation, we were talking about the granularity of controls, and here, we're no longer talking about Acme HQ as being the thing of concern. What we're talking about is room 123 within the Acme HQ. Right? So that's kind of our focus, our context. Right? So if you can imagine a comfort app of some sort from somebody, from some company, and it does the same thing. It makes declarations, and the declaration is basically says, I manage user comfort in room 123 of Acme HQ. Okay, similar to the previous two use cases, it says that to IBB. IBB looks around and says, okay, there's a whole bunch of things here. BAS, I actually control that VAV in room 123. So yeah, if you want to do something with it, I can help you there. The IP controller says, I control the AHU that is driving the VAV in room 123. So if you want to tell me things, you can do that. And the IoT says, I have sensors for room 123, right? And you can start to see how this can start to work with each other. Similar to the OpenADR, there could be sort of realization that, okay, so the Comforts app is good, but if the room is not occupied, I don't want energy to be consumed, right? So I need something to tell me whether whether there's anybody in room 123. So it does that to another orchestration in the sky. Let's say this one is the Acme enterprise system, and it says, okay, there's a calendar system that can actually tell you the availability of, or sort of the use of room 123, right? So it will tell you, it will tell this Comfort app whether anybody's supposed to be in that room, so they can do whatever it needs to do to minimize energy and make it comfortable when somebody's in there. And you can also then see that that data can be fed to a mobile app system that Acme has implemented, so that when John logs in and he's using room 123, all of that can be controlled by John. So this is just another sort of example of an application. So these are 3 applications, right? Well, 2, the 3 slides. And you can actually see them all working at the same time because they're not one or the other. The structure wasn't created for a DR or for comfort or for analytics. It's just a structure. And really, what it's really doing is enabling an application to consume data, which is valuable, and do it in a sort of the most economical way as it can. So I want to leave it up here for a bit and get thoughts of the group.
So, Anto, I think this is great, what you've done here. It really helps tell the story much more clearly than our previous efforts. So I want to just applaud you and thank you for what you've done here. You briefly mentioned broker. I sent you a note in chat. Put a little box to the right of to the IBB that similar to the admin that says broker.
That's what the admin is the brokerage.
Oh, okay. To me, admin
I should have clarified that. Okay, but thank you.
Yeah. So because that's a very important part, because without that broker function, all this interaction among the different pieces isn't going to work as you so nicely described. But again, at a high level, I think the point, hopefully the audience realizes here, is we're integrating applications. We're not integrating different data streams, BACnet versus LAN versus Modbus, right? This is not about that. This is about how applications can talk to each other, and the fact that the applications can live in the cloud or in the building, and are going to live in both locations. And the IBB is the way that these applications can work with one another in a coherent fashion. And this is the problem we're solving, which, in our opinion, has not been at all solved in the marketplace today. And everybody's having to do custom engineering to try to get app A to talk to app B, and then they don't even realize next year they're going to buy app C and it's not going to talk to A or B. So this is a fundamental solution to that problem, and which is why we're spending all this time advocating for the IBB and what it promises to solve for the industry.
Yeah, it's a great presentation, and definitely builds on the beginner's guide to IBB. And I think the examples are amazing, and I think that's what we need to do, is to actually plug vendors into those so we can start seeing the reality of this evolve. So I think as a community, we've got our work cut out for us to how to best present that and depict it. And I think we've got some patterns started, and I think we just need to pursue those.
Yeah, it's something that, in a way, we all have to do together. It's not one individual or company that will actually do this. That's not possible.
Actually, what you're depicting is very much that. Is the way that we actually do work, is we all kind of bounce off of each other. We come in at different levels. We take away what we think the solution and problems are, but we have the flexibility to do that. And in my mind, what you're doing a little bit there is just defining how that would happen in a cloud native environment.
You just said it, Ken, that following the Cloud Native Computing Foundation's sort of guide to how to use technology, that's what we're showing as a way to accomplish all this stuff has been talked about. The fact that these kinds of things should be possible, these sort of outcomes and apps should be possible. And frankly, they are possible in some other environments,
Right.
usually proprietary environments. What this is saying, it's almost like a challenge to the rest of the industry as well. It's like, okay, so we're going to demonstrate how this works, doing it this way, following Cloud Native Computing Foundation, Linux Foundation principles. Doesn't mean there wouldn't be some other way to make all these exact same things happen. But by actually putting a stake in the ground and showing how it's done and what the pieces are and how you can participate, it does put a little bit of a challenge out there to the industry. Join us and show you how you map into it, or show us how you would do it in a different way.
I think there's one thing too that some will jump to the conclusion, some of the traditionals is either I am the IBB or I will become the IBB, which in some ways may kind of limit the flexibility of what we're thinking here. But I'm pretty sure that some of the vendors, they actually believe they are the IBB.
That can do this.
They think they can.
I would say that there are people that can walk to a whiteboard and draw this out. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the whiteboard, we're going to draw it out, and we're going to show what it costs to do this. And how easily you can integrate your new innovative device or your new innovative app, how easily you can come be part of this diagram as opposed to how you would go be part of somebody else's diagram. And that's, I think, where the speed, the momentum picks up as people see how rapidly they can become part of this diagram or leverage this diagram or buy it.
And of course, we've got the phone model that we've all just recently learned how powerful it is and how easy it is to use, to kind of fall back on.
Right. And this is all doable by Jake. Right. And this is the other thing is, remember, Jake is the HVAC engineer as opposed to Mandy, who's the DevOps. It is the intent is all of this is doable by Jake, which means that it does not involve complex integration, writing code or anything, and any of that kind of stuff. That's the vision, is that this whole workflow is doable by HVAC engineers. And
So what is the time constant for some of these things being realized in products, you think?
well, I think that's a great question from the IBB project perspective. Our aim is to have, let's call it an MVP of these abilities at AHR, right? And beyond that is really down to app developers and system developers plugging themselves into this structure. How long is that going to take? We're not talking about writing anything, creating anything new, especially in people that are already using containerized technology. This is not a heavy lift. There is a lift in terms of being able to deal with these declarations. But once the declaration's done, if an app already consumes Haystack, it already consumes Haystack. So it's really, the reason why we call it orchestration is because all we really need to do is to help that app discover sources of Haystack. Right. So it's not I don't believe it's a huge technology leap, but I totally get the potential concern from a just how do vendors adopt this approach, and I'm not sure.
Point, two observations there is, I don't think any of us could have ever imagined that the phone the mobile phone app industry could move as fast as it did to get us products and things that they would sell us online. And the other thing that I think is piggybacking on that is a bit of a decay or the collapse of all of that industry, and these people are now free birds out on the street and are willing to looking for new employment. And so the ability that we need these apps written, and they have the tools to do that. I think it's just a matter of communications, and I think it could move scarily fast, scarily, whatever.
I just watched the BlackBerry movie. So many things in that are fascinating, but one of them was that the people from BlackBerry, the one guy from BlackBerry kept turning to the other saying, they're going to let independent developers develop for the marketplace. That was, and then he repeated it again. If you've seen the movie, it's something that sticks with you. It's like Apple made it possible for independent developers to come in and fill in the gaps of the applications by showing that the digital assets were available. A lot of other parts of the movie were pretty fascinating too, but this architecture allows for that innovation, and the filling in the gaps, and those innovators are going to be able to see how they can make a ton of money by bringing either efficiency or organization or some new capabilities that weren't there before. That's what independent developers do. They can see that there's an opportunity to write a little bit of code, leveraging existing digital assets to create some new capability. But it's just been impossible in these walled garden environments in the past. And that's what we're sort of counting on. Whether you're an innovator inside a big company or you're an innovator that's out on the street.
So Sharon made a point about this, continuing on so let's say the economics of it. Let's just take this occupant comfort scenario that we've got on the screen. How much would that cost to do today for a given BAS system without this? What is how many digits is the number? Steve, could you guess? Is it like $10 or $1,000 or gazillion dollars, somewhere in there?
Well, because it's custom engineering time, to me, it's right away. It's in 5 figures, so it's just a question whether it's low 5 figures, medium, or high, and that's going to be dependent really on the building size, the complexity of the facilities in question. But you know, I think, you know, when you start adding up 20 hours at $200 an hour, you know, it doesn't take long to get to 5 figures. And 20 hours isn't even a start.
Right, until you start to bring in developers and DevOps and a whole bunch of things to do actual custom implementation, then you're going to go to the top end of 5 figures, if not beyond.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
One comment I'd like to make is Jim Lee always used to bring up the issue that one of our biggest problems in the industry was scale, and the fact that we don't have the numbers, we don't have the 100,000s or the millions of devices and stuff. We're always been in that custom thing. What has happened a bit here and everything we're talking about is a workaround in the fact that we've metamorphed to basically more of a common approach, and so now we have a whole bunch of people who can actually help us, not being particularly in our industry, but actually understanding the tasks that we need done. And for them, whether they're doing this for communications or whatever, it's just, oh, you want this done for a comfort app? Tell me a little bit more about how that looks. And you know, so all of a sudden because we've made our model look more like what everybody else is doing, we've worked around a little bit of our industry scale problem.
Anyway, so in terms of where the cloud, where the edge is in cloud native, obviously it's sort of this line downwards. I would argue that that's the edge. The edge is the edge of the cloud, the cloud in the sky, as it were. So the IBB effectively is including the orchestration of devices below. So to me, that's the edge. But maybe that's an argument that maybe that's not such an important question. So how do we think, since this is all about metamorphosizing the industry, or the industry metamorphosizing itself, how is this going to be received, do we think, by vendors, whether it's control vendors or app vendors or analytic type vendors or other sort of providers? I'll stop the share. Any thoughts on
I
that?
think the biggest problem, Anto, is skepticism.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it all sounds good, but the nature of our industry has been to create, silos and proprietary approaches, even when using open standards. So the promise that we're showing here all sounds good, but at the field level, at the owner level, I would think there would be a ton of skepticism that this would ever actually happen.
This would happen, meaning the technology works, or that
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that there'll be an industry provider or providers who will actually create the IBB, market it, and be able to get the effective cooperation from all the app providers and system providers, because the system providers have to play game as well, but play ball here as well. But yeah, I mean, in concept, it's what Ken was saying earlier, is that we're trying to adopt essentially what Apple did with the phones, in that whole fundamental functionality, bring that to our industry, which is the exact opposite of what Apple has today, and Android for that matter, right? So skepticism is the best word I can use.
I would point out that Apple and Android, all of these things and those app domains that grew up from them are consumer behavior in terms of procurement. You can model it with a bell curve, whereas what we have here is an industrial channel where the money still primarily flows through consulting and specifying engineers, who are usually the last of the party on this kind of topic. So, the question is can we get back to procurement again, find some way for people to buy these technologies in a more Apple Android store way, rather than forcing it through the same old procurement methodology, which kills almost anything we try to push through it. And that, to me, is the kind of industry metamorphosis that really gets us going. When do we stand up our own app store and people download what they want with a credit card and it works? And they don't have to have it written into a specification, which is, for the construction of a capital asset that needs to last 30 years. I want my widget now. I want to know something about comfort. I want to know something about analysis, analytics. Take your pick. Download it from the store, buy it, and run it.
Or even going further to actually say, I want to try it for 7 days for free.
But that is the way that IT works in commercial. Forget about consumer. We always talk about the app store. That's consumer, because everybody knows how that works. But in commercial procurements right now, the way IT departments work is that people have a budget for apps. They go to their worldwide technologies, or they go to their vendor, and they just click how many they want. And if it's compatible with a particular architecture, They download it from GitHub. So the model is there for, if things are standardized, there's models for procuring against these standardized platforms. Where you see the bidding have to happen is when you've got 6 incompatible vendors, and you have to go through a 6-month evaluation and beatdown process, because you're going to pick one of the 6 incompatible vendors. And so the buyer has no choice but to go through this sort of unfortunate procurement. I mean, that's one of the ways that it works. There's we haven't standardized the system, so you can't standardize the buying. And in the IT world, we did that. We standardized the systems, and then you could standardize the buying and the selling, for that matter.
So I guess, Rick, when just hearing you talk about that makes me think that if the IBB is bought by the IT department and by the building owner, outside of the whole construction process, they buy this thing, they make that investment, they own it, right? And the reason they want to do this is because they want an open platform for data and applications to be shared, whether it's ADR, whether it's comfort management, whether it's all the other possible applications, right? So they want control over that, and it takes it out of that whole construction process. Now, in other words, we're selling to a different audience, and we're enabling a different process to unfold that I think, Jim, addresses the issue you were talking about, because we're no longer trying to sell to the GC who's selling to the mechanical and so on, right? Forget all that stuff. Let's go direct to the owner with this solution and have them put it in place. And then the only thing the consultant has to do is specify compatibility to the IBB. It's a one-line item in the spec. You want to be the building automation provider, you got to support the IBB broker standard.
We're also in a time of a radical change. I've always been in the retrofit business, and what moves the retrofit business is examples that work by people with brand new technologies that have been invented yesterday. But the big secret is the benevolent owner that actually believes in this stuff and is willing to take that incredible risk and make it happen. And that's been my experience in the back. And I think that's exactly the same. So that combination of the benevolent owner that is just, yep, that looks like it'll work. And I've got these guys with these new technologies. They tell me it's going to work. I trust them, and we're going to make it work. Once we get some of those examples, but the market is changing from that new construction. So we're not even going to be talking about that specification. My humble opinion.
Hey, Mark, you've been very quiet. You want to chime in? You there?
No, not today.
Okay.
There's a darn good chance that the large vendors will want to have their systems be IBB compatible, certified, or obviously they will, because it's not that hard. We just said that. So that would be the intent. As I said earlier, we're being pretty bold and pretty aggressive about saying, okay, somebody needs to actually go build it, demonstrate it, invite people to be part of it. But we are following. This isn't C4SB IBB. This is Cloud Native Computing Foundation, implemented by this, by a group of wily old veterans who see a way to make things go faster in the future. But there's not if there is a one of the old line traditional sort of thinking folks that are concerned about this, let's bring them forward and have a conversation, because I can't figure out why in the world any vendor would not want to have their system be able to be bought like this or sold like this.
Yeah.
People were trying to do it in the days of flip phones, and it would be a tough sell, but what we all do with our phones now, and we get it, and we understand that works better than what we used to do, and we just have to get on with it.
Yeah, well, we're obviously going to continue this the metamorphosing conversation for the rest of October, but I think this has been a great discussion on the edge, on the cloud native edge. So with that, anybody want to make any closing comments, and then we can wrap?
I just want to thank you again, Anto, for your efforts. Again, I think it made all the difference in this hour talk that we just had, because it just did. So that's my closing comment.
Appreciate it. All right.
Great
Well, we'll
stuff.
get the video up as normal tomorrow or Wednesday. Otherwise, hope everybody have a great week, and we'll see each other next week, Sunday.
Okay.
Sounds
Awesome.
great.
Bye-bye all.
Adios.